June 3rd, 2026 at 4 p.m. I call this regular meeting of the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates to order. Clerk Fletcher, can you please read the opening statements?
I'd be happy to, Madam Speaker. Did we say it was 403? Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates will be conducted both in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. All one word. A public participation guided meeting documents are available in advance at www.capecod.gov. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or to file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at jmarczak@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit www.capecod.gov. Members of the public may also attend the meeting remotely, and that information is available at the website. Back to you, Madam Speaker.
May I have a moment of silence to remember our troops who have died in service to our country and the civilian victims of war. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One day.
Clerk Fletcher, would you please call the roll for a quorum?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Delegate Frederickson?
Yeah.
Deputy Speaker Friesel?
Here.
Delegate Fuller?
Here.
Delegate Gallagher?
Here.
Delegate Gessen?
Here.
Delegate Green? Delegate Harder?
Here.
Delegate Killian?
Here.
Delegate King?
Here.
Delegate McKelvey?
Here.
Delegate O'Malley?
Here.
Dean Omen?
Here.
Delegate Sampson? Delegate Ty?
Here.
Speaker Warner?
Here.
Madam Speaker, that is 13 delegates representing 89.51% of the county's population. I do expect Delegate Sampson to be joining us at some point. I do not expect that Delegate Green will be. We've got Delegate Ty, Gallagher, O'Malley, Delegate Frederickson, King, and Gessen remote today. That is a quorum.
Thank you. So there is a quorum for the assembly. Next on the calendar is the approval of journals and minutes. The clerks have distributed a draft of the journals and minutes for the assembly meeting of May 20th to the members prior to this meeting. Are there any corrections? No. Seeing none, from the delegates or the clerk, unless there are any objections, the journal and minutes are approved as submitted. Next on the business calendar is Committee of the Whole. If there is no objection, the assembly will enter into the Committee of the Whole to consider communications in items 8 and 9 informally. Any objections? No, okay. Next on the calendar is communication from members of the public and officials. Yes, next we have public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak to anything either on this calendar or in general? I see no one further who wants to speak. Next on the business calendar is communications from the regional commissioners, administrator, and or directors. I don't take my, I see that, oh, Michael, there he is. Yes, I see Regional Administrator Michael Dutton is here on behalf of the executive branch. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Speaker. And I appreciate you having me, and I apologize I can't be there in person. I do just want to report on the commissioner's last meeting was on the 27th of May, and it was one of our traveling meetings. We were in the town of Yarmouth and had an opportunity to speak with the Yarmouth town manager and department heads and one of the Yarmouth select board members. So fairly productive meeting. And I'll run down very quickly for you. Had a report from the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce on the Route 6 Visitor Center and its operation. We also heard from our staff, Christina Whitten O'Brien, concerning the SHINE program, and also healthy aging update from Mandy Speakman. We had a bit of a report on IT from our IT director and also from Jack Mead, the Register of Deeds, on senior scams that have targeted seniors, and most importantly, as it pertains to property records, and got assurances from our Register of Deeds, Jack Mead, that reports of property scams or stealing of property through registry are greatly exaggerated, and Massachusetts has fairly stringent requirements for the transfer of property, so it's difficult to do that. So it was helpful to hear that. Also heard from Christy Senatori, the director of the Cape Cod Commission, on regional open space plan, and also on a little bit on the commission's efforts to assist with construction disruption because of the installation of wastewater collection systems throughout the several towns right now. Also heard from our dredge director, Ken Cirillo, and also Rick Bishop from the Friends of Bass River on the Bass River dredging pilot project. This could be an opportunity for our dredge to use dredged sand or dredged materials, I should say, for some habitat restoration and rebuilding of some of the disintegrated island systems that are used for coastal protection in Yarmouth. So we are looking at that, and I think the Assembly has heard a little bit about those efforts, mostly requiring a piece of equipment, relatively inexpensive piece of equipment that can do essentially a spray distribution of spoils that come out of the dredge process. And then finally, the commissioners heard a report from Carol Coppola and myself on lottery spending in Barnstable County, and I'm happy to share that. If I haven't already, I'm happy to share that with the Assembly. We send approximately $213 million as a group, as a Cape community. We send about $213 million of money up to the state from lottery sales, and roughly 74% of that is expended on prizes as well as administrative overhead for the Lottery Commission, and then the balance 20 some odd percent is distributed as unrestricted government aid. And we used to be called local aid. Now it's called unrestricted government, general government assistance aid. So what we have found is we send about $216 million up to Boston. We get back a pittance of that, roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 6% of what we send up. So there is some effort on the commissioner's level and also on some among the town's finance directors and so forth to try to convince the legislature that the formula that is used, which is highly reliant on equalized valuations, is actually quite unfair very unfair to the Cape, as well as the islands. So we'll certainly have more on that, but if the Assembly is interested, I'm happy to send along a draft copy, which is what we're working on now. And then finally, their consent agenda, bunch of things, but worth noting, we're moving into the second year of our shared regional housing program, a second year in which the towns contribute towards that. And I think we'll have 14 out of the 15 towns again participating in year two, which I think is good. And then finally, worth noting, the commissioners just sent a letter of support at the request of the Cooperative Extension to support a House and Senate bill relative to paint recycling, which has been in the State House for a number of years, but I think there's some incentive to get it passed this year. So that is about it, and happy to answer any questions.
Deputy Speaker Frizzell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for your report, Administrator Dutton. I have a couple of comments or questions for you. First of all, on this lottery money, which we see about 6%, you said, of what we send?
Roughly 6%, I believe it is. I'll look it up right now.
So in the formula for distributing that is equalized valuation? Is that what I heard?
It's heavily skewed based on equalized valuation and also population.
Population.
Year-round population. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that then greater shares go to major cities of Massachusetts then I see. And our delegation is on top of this and trying to get the legislature. I mean, I would assume it's a legislative fix that's necessary for that. Is that correct?
That actually, ironically, while we were putting together the data for this report, we learned that Senator Fernandez, obviously our Cape, one of our two Cape senators, had successfully argued for an amendment to the state budget, which would call for the creation of a commission specifically, or a study committee to specifically look at lottery distribution and lottery aid, and propose making changes to the formula. So that is good news. So the long answer is all of what I gave you. The short answer is yes, the legislative delegation is looking.
Okay, so there's no one alternative formula that people who are now considered unfair are backing. There's just maybe other ideas, but no one alternative formula that people are backing at this point?
Not at this point. There are some recommendations that Carol and I made in our report to the commissioners, or our draft report to the commissioners. One being, sort of a floor, a guaranteed amount that towns would get, and above that would be distributed according to equalized valuations. That's one option. The other option is to reconfigure the allocation mechanism and allow it to fund capital projects that are essentially required by the state. That was another option. So there's to answer the question, there's no specific recommendation on a specific formula at this point, which is why I think it is important to have this discussion at the legislative level. So I'm very supportive, and we're hoping all the towns will be very supportive of the Senate and that now the House making that amendment to the budget.
I could just comment a little further. It would be helpful for the Assembly to see the report that you and Carol have prepared. That's one thing. Secondly, would it be of any value for the Assembly to send a letter to appropriate legislative leaders supporting this study in the Fernandez bill? And I guess at this point, it'd be premature for us to support a particular alternative formula, but certainly continuing to look at something as an alternative. I don't know whether the commissioners have already done that on behalf of the county or not. Is that something which we should be considering doing as helpful to help the towns on this as well?
I I would certainly say that yes, it would be helpful. Specifically, right now, I think it would be helpful to reach out to the House membership, the Capes delegation on the House side, and encourage them to adopt language similar to the Senate side, which I can provide. I'll provide that to Owen.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. If I could just continue for a minute on the dredge
And
separately.
This is the last one.
Okay, so okay, the dredge, I thought I saw some comments, it might have been from the chair Forrest, that there's a concern that with the reduction in state aid, that the towns are going to have less money to spend on dredge, and that we're going to see, maybe Carol will get into that in her report, but we might see in the out years here, deficits in the dredge budget. Can you give us any more information about what that is all about?
I don't know that we would see deficits in the dredge budget, but we are concerned that the state has not been particularly forthcoming about the dredge grant program that's helped to fund a number of the projects as well as some capital items for us, but mostly actual dredge projects throughout the Cape. We are cautiously optimistic. There's an environmental bond bill that is about to be debated in the general court, and I think that there is now enough understanding and knowledge and awareness of the Cape's dredge needs that we're cautiously optimistic that that we will be hopefully a significant part of that environmental bond bill. So we're crossing our fingers, but every little bit of advocacy is very helpful on that, and we want to make sure that certainly our delegation understands. I think they do. We've been quite clear about that, but I do think they understand our needs, and as well as the needs of other communities, coastal communities that avail themselves of dredge work. So yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm always curious about the Route 6 roadsides thing that we do. It's a state operation, but yet we fund it every year. Can you justify that? I know we've done it forever, but we're spending money. We're giving the money to a private organization, the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce, and there seems to be no benefit to the county populace doing this. I can go on, but I'd like to know this is fairly new to you, but it's going on, and it's a state organization that refuses to fund it, and we're putting our hard-earned tax dollars into opening it up and giving the building to a private corporation.
I think that's a good question, and I think the rationale, my understanding is that the rationale is that it serves a fairly vital purpose especially for those summer visitors that are traveling eastbound past the town of Barnstable to the lower and outer Cape. My understanding is that there is nothing about it that is necessarily state-run, and it's done by the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce. So I agree with Delegate Ullman. It's been going on for years, and is continues to operate. I don't know a whole lot of
it's a
particulars.
It's a state-owned property, and they
Correct.
refuse to fund it, so we're doing it. And what bothers me about it again too is that if a private entity like the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce runs it, they should be able to at least open it up to the businesses in the Lower Cape to advertise their inns and their restaurants and such like that. But I understand that they charge an awful lot of money to do that, and I think it would be fair if we made sure that the Barnstable County citizens took advantage or had an opportunity to take advantage of those tourism opportunities when people stop at that rest stop. We're paying for the whole thing. And I, as a former owner of a business in the Lower Cape, I know that they were quite dear. It was a lot of money for us to advertise it with them. And they're a private, for-profit agency, and we're giving them all the money to do this. I just think that there's room for improvement.
I can certainly dig into that a little more and give you more information. Be happy to.
And thank you. That was my one thing. But going along with what Mr. Preisel said, Delegate Preisel said about the lottery, from my understanding, and you can correct me, the revenues that we send up to 213 or 260 million dollars, whatever it turns out to be, that is not a function of how we get the money back again. If we sent them $0, we'd still be in the pile to get the same amount of money. And it seems, I think that's what I remember to be true. It's not, the sales are not a function of return. So
Right.
if we want to put pressure on it, we could say, we're not going to sell any more lottery tickets. We'll just take the money. I mean, we could do that. I'm sure that would not be a campaign promise by a delegation, but it's something that I've always wondered about. If we're not, the less we sell, we still get the same 4% or whatever it is, 6%. 6%, yeah, 13. I read it, but it's probably about $13 million that they give the cave out of the 213 we send up. So there might be some pressure by the business community that we could explore. Thank you.
Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Regarding the dredge, which we'll have to have a large conversation about, because I don't think it should be an enterprise fund. It's the biggest thing we do for the towns, and it doesn't matter if it makes money. But at the last dredge meeting, we were going to get the cost of the sprayer, and I haven't seen that. So I'm wondering how much that'll cost. Thanks.
Good question. I don't know the exact figure, but I can certainly get that.
Thank you.
Are there any other delegates with questions for Administrator Dutton? Oh, all right. Thank you very much. We appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Next on the calendar is the Cape Cod Regional Government Fiscal Year 2026 Third Quarter Financial Report by Treasurer Finance Director Carol Coppola.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. Let me just bring up this presentation for you. It's loading. Oh, there we go. It's just a bit delayed. Okay. So I'm presenting to you the March 31st, 2026, which is quarter three financial results for Barnstable County. This was prepared and presented to the commissioners, I think at their May 5th meeting. We're managing at that time just under $86 million. We have two operating budgets. We consider the general fund Cape Cod Commission operating budgets, one enterprise fund, as you know, which is the dredge. We manage 78 other grants and other special revenue funds. We have 7 trust and stabilization funds, and we have 12 active capital funds. I can tell you that we reconcile 24 bank accounts every month. They were all reconciled as of March 31st. We had money market rates that ranged in March anywhere between 3.15% and 3.83%, and that highest rate is coming from banking institution, which is MMDT, as we call it. It's a depository, Massachusetts Municipal Depository Trust. This is just a summary of all of the revenue that was budgeted and received as of March 31st, and I'm providing it for The major funds, the operating budget, Cape Cod Commission and dredge, and then I combined, as I had presented in the prior slide, federal, state, and local grants. We have capital funds. We've got an OPEB trust fund, and stabilization funds as well as other special revenue funds. And what are all those other special revenue funds? Well, a good example of what those some of those other funds are something such as your aqua fund, your, the test center, your clean water test center, things of that nature. So all of the budgets were on track as of March 31st. You will notice that Cape Cod Commission, it looks as shy as revenue, but their major source of revenue is the assessments that are provided to each of the 15 communities. And the second set of those assessments were due May 1st. And at this time, they've all been collected. And just providing the same type of information for you for expenditures for FY26, where we have budgets versus actuals. And I just gave you the overall percentage of what was expended in those three major funds, which is dredge, Cape Cod Commission, and the operating budget. Breaking this down a little further, this is by major category within the general fund. Presenting here is the county commissioner's revenue, and then information technology, which is the charges for each one of the communities in which IT serves. And then finance department, that is the de minimis that we charge for grants. And so on. Cooperative extension is a state grant that they receive. And then the registry of deeds, as well as the tax assessments and health and environment. And those are all laboratory receipts. And moving forward, we've got a few other categories here. We're doing fairly well on our interest income, up over, at this point in time, we're well over $750,000. The sheriff reimbursement is the amount that comes into the general fund from the sheriff that funds your OPEB trust fund. And then we've got transfers in, which is, from unreserved fund balance. And that portion, the large portion of that actual went out to stabilization fund, capital stabilization fund. And then there's a funding for your PFAS stabilization as well. So those are the sources of revenue in your general fund. Now I just want to be able to present to you we've got some operating expenses here. I've summarized them for major categories, which is salaries, fringe, other expenses, your debt service, and some other funding, which really is that the transfers out to your capital stabilization in some areas such as that. So we call those other funding uses. So salary and fringe here, as I pointed out, is just about 74% of your operating budget. I'm looking at the budgets in a different manner. This is by department, rather than summarizing everything between the major categories. I'm providing it here by department and provided you with some information with the percentage that was expended or was encumbered, meaning if there's a purchase order that's been issued, those funds are anticipated to be expended. And so they're kind of a promise to pay a vendor. And so at the bottom line here is that at 3/31, the general fund was about 80% either promised on a purchase order or expended. So your revenues were in line with where we anticipated. Your lab revenues are coming in very strong. Your major expense categories are within line of the budget. The Registry of Deeds was up over your actual FY25 receipts as of March 31st by 3.3%. And those numbers continue to come in strong as well. Sorry, there's a delay. There. Providing the same information for Cape Cod Commission. This is by major category of revenue. And you'll see here that the environmental protection is your tax assessments to each community. And as I had mentioned before, that the second portion of those tax assessments are due May 1st. And so you'll see that it was about, their revenue was about 50% collected, but that certainly caught up. They do budget a reserve to balance their budget, the Cape Cod Commission, and you can see that's $1 million here. And there's no anticipation of using those budgeted reserves whatsoever. Providing information in the same manner as I provided for the general fund in the major categories of salaries, fringe benefits, and expenses for Cape Cod Commission. You'll see that there are not categories such as debt or what I considered other funding uses because they don't exist within the Cape Cod Commission budget. And then providing the same information for Dredge. Dredge revenue is coming in very strong this year. There's also additional projects that were signed on after March 31st. We certainly don't anticipate any challenges with regard to their appropriations versus their expenditures this year. And this is providing a summary much the same as I provided for the general fund, a major category of expenses. So I usually try to add a little bit of information here when I give you my presentations for a quarterly basis. And right this quarter, I wanted to present some information on PFAS and what the county has expended since its inception, if you will, or certainly since the settlement with the town of Barnstable occurred, and then the cost thereafter. So these are actual expenditures to date. This doesn't take into consideration future expenditures. So you'll see all the categories here that I've provided. And then I just provided the information with regard to purchase orders that we have outstanding as of the end of March. And so that adds another $300,000 to either what's been expended or what's been placed on a purchase order. The next slide that I'm providing you some funding sources for PFAS. We had an ARPA project that funded $4 million in PFAS planning and remediation. There's been borrowing that has been authorized of just under $12 million. There's a congressionally directed spending that the county receives or is in the process of receiving of $3 million. The general fund operations have supported a tremendous amount of PFAS expenses. And when the MCWT stands for Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, the capping project that was completed a number of years ago, about 4 years ago, over at the former training facility, there was principal forgiveness by the way of the federal government through the state. And that resulted in $46,000. And then you have PFAS stabilization funding that you have directed into a stabilization fund for that purpose. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So going back to capital both the revenue side and the expense side. Just help me here. I'm not sure why we're showing like 40 million or so in the revenue side and on the budget side, and yet the actual is like between 1.7 million and 2 million. Can you explain those numbers to me? What's in that number? That's $40 million number, and what is the number we should be seeing in terms of expense against that number, and where are we getting that money from, that $40 million?
So the 12 active capital funds that the county is currently managing has capital projects dating back to about 2015 that have been authorized. And so they range from capital projects from 2015 to 2026. And so those outstanding capital projects total $40 million. And so the information that's provided here is actual expenditures through 3/31.
But is that actual expenditure of 2,000,001? I mean, that's the total we've spent out of the 40 million that
This year,
only this year.
yes.
So do you have a cumulative number?
Oh, well, we can get you a cumulative, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm just curious if we've got these stabilization funds at $40+ million, how much cumulatively,
Mhm.
which, because it's going back all the way to fiscal 2015, how much we have spent of that 40 million in those funds and what's left in those funds, and whether there's anything that we're intending those funds to cover going forward.
Yep. And so the $40 million, just so you're aware, is going to be much larger because this only represents the capital project that are outstanding right now, this fiscal year. So there were appropriations for capital projects back in 2015 that were fully expended, some. So I just want to make sure I'm giving you the information that you are looking for.
And I'm sure, I want to make sure I'm asking for the right information, okay? So, $40 million is not everything going back to 2015. So what I'm curious about is if we're looking at 40 million, and that's what we're working with right now in capital projects and capital stabilization funds, the 40 million is in stabilization funds. We transferred money into that stabilization fund, so it's sitting there, but we haven't spent more than, how much of that 40 million have we spent is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. So you just want me to hone in on these particular projects?
Yeah, because I mean, if you've got them, I mean, all the way back, but I don't need that. I'm looking at what's current. Thank
Okay.
you.
Sure.
If I could ask one other question.
Sure.
Going to the Cape Cod Commission, help me there. I couldn't get the numbers on my own screen fast enough, but I see where their assessments come in later. So they were getting revenue of maybe 50% of the total they're expecting, but yet their expenditures exceeded, right, that number. So I thought I saw like 2 million something in revenues, but 3 million something in 3.6 in expenses. And on the revenue side, they were getting less than the 3 million, correct? So is that right, or am I wrong? I can't see all your screens at once.
So revenue collected as of March 31st was just over $3.6 million for the Cape Cod
That was
Commission.
collected, okay. And what was the expense? The same 3.6, or what was the expense? 3.9.
3.9.
So the other 300, where does that come? Where do they have the cash flow to pay for those expenses?
So cash flow is I think we perhaps touched on this 6 months ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So our reserves or our unreserved fund balance or their restricted fund balance provides necessary cash flow for operations because, the timing of some of our expenses occur July 1st for the entire fiscal year. And the timing of some revenues are delayed. The
Yep.
first tax assessments are due November 1st.
So,
And the second of May 1st.
so it's like a working capital account. So does it get replenished when the revenue comes in so that they're not at the end of the fiscal year, they won't be down that money in the reserves because they've replenished it with revenues that came in later?
Yes, depending on their performance. So if the Cape Cod Commission has, just gonna, $5 million in restricted fund balance, and their revenues came in at a total of $5 million, and their expenses came in at $5.1 million, then that restricted fund balance will be reduced by
Right,
$100,000.
so we don't know till the end of the fiscal year. What you're telling me.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes. Okay, let's go with Delegate Killian first and then Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon, Director Capola. With the PFAS, we hope to collect some of this money we've spent out, if not all of it, at some point in time. I know we're involved in some litigation. Whether that happens or not is speculative. However, if we were to get the money back, how would we apply revenues we've received, like, or we spent like ARPA funds? If we spent $4 million in ARPA funds and we get that money back from some litigation, how would we spend that money? What could we do with it? Because ARPA obviously had restrictions on how we could spend it. If we actually got it back, would we have to give it back to the federal government, or would we have to spend it under ARPA restrictions, which will be expired, I think, at the end of this year?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I think that depends on the manner in which you're receiving the funds. If the funds are received just for PFAS, construction or cost moving forward, then I can't imagine that you would have to give the funds back to the federal government, or to, whether it be any other funding opportunity that the county would have capitalized on. But I think it depends on the manner in which the funds were received and whether they were restricted for particular purposes, right? So I think that if the county were to agree to receive funds that had restrictions, saying you have to then give back any ARPA funds to the federal government, I don't know if I can't speculate as to what would have the decisions that would be made.
And the same for the, you call them congressionally directed spending. And was that essentially a grant from the federal government to spend on this particular application?
That was that is just in the process of being received, yes.
And again, I would say if we were to recover that money some later date, how would we apply that? Because we essentially got the grant twice. We got paid.
Well,
Again, it sounds like we probably don't know at this point. I was just hoping maybe that you had some information.
I'm not sure that I can answer your question today. But I also know that there's been discussion about, a pretty significant liability of the county for PFAS. So there will be future costs incurred by the county, and whether those are reduced because of the work that's already been completed or not, I think that we're yet to have that final conversation with the environmental engineers.
I think in the past, we've heard costs that could total $50 to $60 million. I think that's probably about the same where we're at. Okay, thank you.
Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just curious, the Registry of Deeds revenue, which, yes, is up 3% from last year, but it looks like it's really low this year. I mean, in terms of what we've received and what we expected to receive in the budget. Did I read that wrong?
So the comparison that I made with the Registry of Deeds revenue was based on the actual collections from fiscal year 25. In fiscal year 26, we increased that budget because we wanted it to reflect historically what has happened in the past in a conservative manner. And so, but we are on track to collect the revenue for fiscal year 26.
So the money, we upped the expected revenue, but we are gonna hit what we upped it to.
We have one more month left. And so, usually typically the month of June is extremely strong.
Are there any other questions? No? Well, thank you. That was a really, really wonderful report with a lot of good data that I appreciate seeing. So I guess that at this point, I see there are no further delegates who want to be recognized. So thank you for the update, and the assembly will now convene. Next on the calendar is reports of officers and committees. The first report is from the Assembly Standing Committee on Government Affairs and Rules. I am chair of that committee, but I'm certain and currently presiding at this meeting. So Deputy Speaker Friesel, can you please read that report?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Report in minutes of the meeting of the Standing Committee on Government Affairs and Rules from Monday, June 1st at 4 p.m. The Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Government Affairs and Rules met remotely on Monday, June 1st, 2026 at 4 p.m. The committee discussed proposed ordinance 2026-11, ensuring community safety and lawful federal immigration enforcement, and the Barnstable County Charter Commission study question. The committee heard from Regional Administrator Michael Dutton regarding the administrative implications of proposed ordinance 2026-11. Administrator Dutton described the regional government's ongoing work to classify its spaces as public or private. He outlined two broad operational concerns. First, the administrative burden on staff, and second, the risk of federal funding reductions. Administrator Dutton committed to providing written recommendations on language refinements. The committee did not make further recommendations regarding the ordinance. The committee then took up discussion of the Barnstable County Charter Commission study question. Delegates discussed the commissioner's decision to place the Charter Commission question on the ballot, options for the committee's response, and the prospect of a collaborative explanatory document. Speaker Warner indicated she would contact Chair Forrest of the Board of Regional Commissioners to explore a coordinated approach, and Clerk Fletcher was directed to confirm with the Secretary of State's office whether information on the question would appear in the state voter information book. That's the report, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Next.
Yep. This one.
Oh, is orders of the day. There are none for this meeting. And the next on the calendar is new business. Do we have any new business? We have none.
No, we do.
Oh, we do. The first item under new business is the reappointment of the council for the Assembly of Delegates. Deputy Speaker Friesel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will make a motion here on this matter. I move to reappoint the law firm of Mead, Tallerman, and Costa LLC as counsel for the Assembly of Delegates through December 31st, 2026, under Barnstable County Administrative Code, Section 2.3D.
Second.
Okay.
We have a second. There is a motion and a second to reappoint Mead, Tallerman, and Costa LLC as counsel for the Assembly of Delegates through December 31st, 2026, under Barnstable County Administrative Code, Section 2.3, parenthesis D, parenthesis. Is there any discussion?
Madam Speaker, if I may.
Deputy Speaker Friesel.
In support of this motion, the reason I would propose adopting the motion is that so far we have turned to Mead, Tallerman, and Costa for legal questions. In fact, just I think a week or so ago, there was a question from the Telecommunications Committee concerning the ordinance on a potential fund to be created for emergency equipment. So we have a need from time to time to consult with them separate from the county council, which is KP Law, Sometimes we ask them charter questions and sometimes it's other questions. We've asked them questions, for example, on ordinance concerning the immigration enforcement. The amount of money they charge us for their services is rather reasonable, I would say. I know I'm kind of biased being a former lawyer, but I'll say I think their fees are reasonable. We do not commit ourselves to any liability whatsoever by virtue of approving this motion and retaining them through December 31st. That merely will mean that if we use them, it's under the same terms that we've currently agreed to, which has been in place since almost a year, more than a year ago, frankly, at the same rates, no change in rates. They haven't increased their rates, and they've agreed to abide by the same terms they've had with us. So there's no fixed liability that we're entering into by virtue of approving this motion. It merely means if we care to use them, these are the terms we're going to use them on. We could hire another counsel if we wanted to. This does not stop us from doing anything we want to do. We could never consult them again if we didn't want to consult them. And all we would be indebted for is any unpaid bill for time that they've provided to us so far. So for those reasons, I recommend that we approve the motion.
Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was on the interview committee for the attorneys, and I thought this firm was gangbusters. I really was impressed with everyone that we spoke to and that they had working there. So I second that we retain them, especially because I believe we'll need them for the charter question. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions delegates might have? I see no further delegates who want to be recognized. So the question is on reappointing Mead, Tellerman, and Costa LLC as counsel for the Assembly of Delegates through December 31st, 2026, under Barnstable County Administrative Code, Section D.3, parenthesis 2.3, parenthesis D, end of parenthesis. Clerk Fletcher, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Delegate Frederickson. Delegate Frederickson.
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Frizzell.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller.
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher.
Yes.
Delegate Gessen.
Yes.
Delegate Green. Delegate Harder.
Yes.
Delegate Killian.
Yes.
Delegate King.
Yes.
Delegate McKelvey.
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley.
Yes.
Dean Omen.
Yes.
Delegate Sampson.
Yes.
Delegate Ty.
Yes.
Speaker Warner.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, that is 14 delegates representing 98.44% of the county's population.
The motion passes. Are there any announcements? Clerk Fletcher?
Yes, Madam Speaker. So we are lined up to have a Finance Committee meeting, I believe on the 8th, to continue the discussions that came out of the Finance Committee's review of the FY27 budget. And it is highly likely that we will have a Telecommunications Committee meeting next week on the 10th to continue discussing the Ordinance 2026-14 on generators. So please be on the lookout for either myself or Assistant Clerk Dvorak giving you a call about quorum. I believe that's all I have for now, Madam Speaker.
Is there anyone else? Yes, go ahead. Delegate Sampson.
Thank you. So you're going to call to make sure that there is not, or we don't have a quorum of the delegates?
We'll call to make sure that there's enough delegates to actually conduct that business if we have it.
Okay.
And the agenda for the Finance Committee meeting will go out tomorrow. And I believe I've got some work to do with the Chair of Telecommunications to wrangle the meeting on Wednesday. But
And do we run into a problem if others join in and we now have a majority of the assembly?
okay,
I think this issue came up before.
No.
That's why I asked.
so let's talk about this because it's kind of important. You see where we are in the room now. If we had a committee meeting and because my training comes from working for a state legislature. If we had a committee meeting and you guys wanted to sit in the back of the room and listen, and if you wanted to be recognized, let's say it was your piece of legislation, right? You would, or your ordinance, you would come up and be recognized, and you go to the back of the room and everyone would know that you are a spectator and you came to make a comment, and that's it. The problem with a remote meeting is it's pretty hard for people to tell when you're deliberating, when you're not, and who's participating. And so technically, even though it's noticed, if you have 8 members of the assembly representing a majority of the county's population, that's essentially a meeting of this body, instead of just being a committee meeting. And so we have to be careful. So if, take Delegate Frederickson, who represents 21.36% of the county's population, if he were to come in and say, give his comments about an ordinance he sponsored, and then leave, return his camera off, it's pretty clear he's not deliberating. He had a comment to make, he made it, now he's gone. We just have to be careful. So like if you know you don't want to participate in the meeting, but you want to watch it, you're better off watching it on YouTube, just so that it's clear. Or if you come to a meeting, as some of you do, that your camera's turned off, right? I try to be cognizant with Assistant Clerk Dvorak of what the count is in the room, but we had this situation on Monday with the Assembly Governmental Affairs and Rules Committee that you have more of a quorum than a quorum of this body in that electronic room, and so I don't know if someone would be able to sustain a challenge, because it is a publicly noticed meeting and you're all there and everyone can watch you, that we don't need to tempt fate, right? We don't need to spend the time and resources to defend an open public meeting law violation because we were sloppy on quorum. And so if you've got a question about that, even during a meeting, you can reach out to myself or Assistant Clerk Dvorak, as some of you do. And I cannot give you solid advice necessarily on whether you should turn your camera on and talk, and it's up to the chair whether to recognize you. But please keep that in mind as we go forward, that if you're not a member of that committee, you'll have a chance to deliberate on these things. If you have a question or a concern about something that's happening in committee, make sure that you reach out to the chair or you reach out to myself or the assistant clerk, and we can make sure that we get those answers for you during the committee meeting, even if you're not a member. Or if you have a question afterwards, we can get them to the appropriate person in writing. But it's supposed to be for the members of that committee to do the work, and you'll get your chance later. Sorry. That's what happens when there's not a lot on the agenda. Don't feel bad for talking.
Go ahead.
So I think this is valuable conversation, regardless of the size of the day's agenda. I think this is important. It happens all the time. So a further question I have is, I assume 5 members of the committee, no matter how it's constituted, could not possibly be a majority of the population.
So
And then let me ask even further, if I'm right or wrong about that, what about the fact that there's now 2 alternates? What degree of participation, how do they affect that same majority of population deliberation issue?
So we've asked that question to KP during open public meeting law trainings. We've asked it before. You're well aware, as a fellow attorney, tend not to ask lawyers questions unless you want to live by the written answer. But the answer that we got was a quorum of the assembly is both 8 members, and those members have to represent over 50% of the population. Either or is not a quorum, right? So if you have 4 people or 5 people that represent a majority of the county's population, it is still not a quorum of the assembly, right? Because it has both prongs, both components. It needs both, right? And that is to prevent somebody from, the way we're currently constructed, somebody from, say, having a meeting that has delegates that represent a majority of the county's population. You could have that with 4 or 5 of you, and that is still not a quorum, because they want to make sure that there's a majority of towns here as well. So although I was trained as an attorney, I'm not your attorney. We can ask that question of counsel if you want to live by the answer. There's nothing like us that I'm aware of in the Commonwealth. And so just like there are a couple of lawyers or people with legal training around this table, black letter for, we cannot violate a quorum with open public meeting law. A quorum is defined under our charter as both those things, 8 and 8. Those 8 have to represent 51%. You can have 8 people in this room and still not have a quorum if they're the right 8 of you. So, you know, it's dicey. We can always ask the attorney, or we can just live in the idea that we should just be careful and be transparent, and we should be fine. So the short thing is 7, no. 7, even if it's over, is not a quorum of the full assembly.
Are there any other questions or announcements we'd like to have at this point? Well, the assembly has considered all the items on the calendar. Any further business from delegates? No? Since there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned.